more on this, let's bring in sports journalist Paul Myers from our sister channel, RFI. Thanks for joining us, Paul. Take us through who the favourites are this time around, and are there any players in particular we should be keeping an eye on?
Tournament favourites are clearly going to be Morocco. They're hosting this tournament with a lot of fanfare. And the thing is that they were favourites in the 2022, which happened actually about 2024. The last Cup of Nations in Côte d'Ivoire, that's because they got to the semi-finals at the World Cup in Qatar, but they got knocked out in the last 16 by South Africa. So everyone's learned then that if you try to predict who the favourites are, you usually end up with egg on your face. I'm saying that Morocco are in a strong position. They have got fantastic spine. They've got Achraf Hakimi, the defender. He plays for Paris Saint-Germain. He's won loads of trophies with his club side. Mustn't forget, as you say, Senegal. They've got Sadio Mane. They've got a strong side and a lot of good operators. DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, perhaps dark horses. You'll remember that they got through the African playoffs for next year's World Cup in the United States, Canada, and Mexico by beating Cameroon and Nigeria. So that really puts them in a good place before they go off to the Intercontinental playoffs next March. I'd back them as dark horses. There's also, of course, the defending champions Côte d'Ivoire. They won on home soil in Abidjan at the last Cup of Nations. Emerse Faye took over the team in quite chaotic circumstances. Côte d'Ivoire had been humiliated 4-0 by Equatorial Guinea, their worst defeat in a Cup of Nations. He took over. Faye managed to get them through the knockout stages, the last 16, the quarterfinals, and the semi-finals. And they beat Nigeria in the final in Abidjan. Faye has also steered Côte d'Ivoire to next year's World Cup. So he's managed to show that what he did in Côte d'Ivoire was no fluke. So I reckon they'll be a tough team to get past.
Morocco are part of the favourites, but they haven't won the tournament in about 50 years. How are they going to handle the pressure of playing on home turf, or will it help them?
That is going to be the key, because the favourites tag is always a difficult one. It's rare that the favourites actually emerge and do well. So the pressure will be on them. The coach, Walid Regragui, was really quite sort of cool and clinical when he announced his squad. He was really businesslike and said, look, I've got no time to talk about this list. I've got to get on with the business of creating a good team ethic. A lot of it will be on Achraf Hakimi's fitness. He was injured during a Champions League match for Paris Saint-Germain against Bayern Munich. That was on his 27th birthday on the 4th of November. And since then, really, Morocco has been holding its breath, hoping that their star man can come back. He's declared himself fit. If he is truly up to speed, then that will be an immense bonus to the team. And then he can perhaps take the brunt of the pressure. There were a few youngsters in the side, but there are a lot of experienced players. The goalkeeper, you've seen Bunu has played at the World Cup, and there is enough experience to get them through, to help the youngsters cope with the pressure, and also show that, yeah, sure, if you're going to be Africa's top team, which is what Morocco are, you've got to live with the pressure. And this is the kind of thing footballers usually say that they want.
What expectations do we have for viewership? And of who's following this competition and where are they watching from?
All around the world. It's getting better. For example, in Britain, where I come from, the Channel 4 has said that it signed a deal with the Confederation of African Football, which organises the Cup of Nations. It's going to be free to air, which is a big breakthrough, because oftentimes it's by subscription, not that many people are interested. The viewership is pretty low. But this time, if, for example, it can go on Channel 4, then that will be helpful, because it's something that I didn't really grow up with in Britain. Yeah, you heard about it, but you couldn't really go and see the match on telly. So something like that will help. In other countries, it's going to be free to air. In Norway, that's a new deal, the Confederation of African Football says. So more people are going to be watching it. Across the continent, yeah, everybody knows about it. Everybody's going to be in the bars. If they don't have the subscriptions, they're going to be in the cafes and watching at home as well.
And tell me, what are the stakes of this edition? Because it's taking place a couple of months after the Gen Z protests in Morocco that were partly fueled by the country's huge investment in sports infrastructure, right?
Yeah, it's a bit of a vicious circle, and the problem with those protests were fairly legitimate concerns. They claim there's not enough investment in health, education, and creating job opportunities. The government is ploughing an estimated $2 billion into revamping the stadiums in Fez, Marrakesh, Casablanca to bring in the investment. So yes, it does work. Will it work in the short term? We'll see. But it increases the profile of Morocco, which is always good. But does it really calm those fears about everybody forgetting about these things? There's always a dichotomy in these kind of instances. People are fanatical about football. For example, a couple of weeks ago, when the Under-20 World Cup team came back from winning that tournament in Chile, the streets of Rabat were lined with well-wishers. So you can't say that nobody likes football. That's just not the case. A successful team from Morocco would be fantastic, and there'll be kind of weapons-grade celebrations if they win the title. But by winning the title, that will also highlight the fact that there hasn't been the investment in things like education and job opportunities. So it is a bit of a vicious circle, but it's something that the government wants to have. And of course, the players want to win, and the people want their team to win.
Paul, you've been covering Afcon for a long time. You'll have to tell us how many of these tournaments you've covered. How is it involving as a tournament? We don't have much time, so.
Well, it's going to go to 4 years, which is a bit of a shame, because it's been every 2 years since I started covering it back in Ghana in 2008. It's the latest innovation. It was announced yesterday, perhaps on Saturday, by the CAF boss, Patrice Motsepe, 4 years from 2028. We'll see what that brings, but every 2 years has been fantastic, and it's created a lot of excitement in each of those tournaments.
Paul Myers, thank you so much for sharing your insights and joining us today.